So Jarvis, I know, and ATL Day One family, we know that there is one more game in the regular season for the Falcons, and we will be doing some evaluation, but we're still contemplative as well because we know that there is a draft right around the corner. And that's probably where the Falcons are going to build, if we're being honest. So there were some comments that Arthur Smith made that were very interesting. He talked about different organizations that he had looked at in terms of how they built and kind of watching their trajectory for success. And one of them we're very familiar with here in Atlanta because it's the 49ers. And he talked about the fact that, yeah, in the first couple of years, Kyle Shanahan may have had some struggles. They were kind of bad years, but it turned around fairly quickly. You go 13-3, you go to the Super Bowl, and except for maybe a little issue that was an electrical problem that we shall not talk about too much. You
Yeah, right.
definitely, yeah, you definitely could have won
Yes,
that Super Bowl. Now,
indeed.
that said, you look at how they've been building, and yes, they have weapons on offense, but real talk, they build defensively, and it starts and stops with the likes of Nick Bosa, right?
Yes.
So when you think about what the 49ers have done as an organization, you think about Kyle Shanahan as being an offensive mastermind on a team that is decisively defensively focused. How does that play into what the Falcons are going to do, Jarvis? Do we think that maybe they should just go ahead and listen to my philosophy?
Absolutely. I'm all on board for going defense, defense, defense. And,
Yeah.
and when you think about why, like, because I really wholeheartedly, the Falcons probably will never admit this. You want to take advantage of that guy that you have calling plays,
Yes.
Mr. Dean Pease, because we know he's not going to be around for that long. Not
Right.
talking about death. I'm talking about being the defense
Yeah.
coordinator for the Falcons
Right.
because,
Because remember, he was
oh,
in semi-retirement.
somebody he was retired. He was chilling. I don't need this. I'm good. I've done all I could do. And I think that the Falcons should take advantage of what they're working with and having him there to be able to teach these guys and teach this system. And so, because at some point he's going to move on. And I think that when you think about that draft, right? Like they say, they struggled in the first 2 years. They
Mm-hmm.
went 13-3 in 2019,
Yeah.
and they started in 2019 by drafting a Mr. Nick Bosa, that dude, and they were loaded up on defense. They even got Andre Greenlaw in that draft as well, who
Mm-hmm.
has been a solid starter for ever since then. So
Yeah.
I think when you think about getting the necessary pieces, like because we talked about the young pieces that the Falcons have on offense. Desmond Ritter, whether or not you believe he's the guy going forward for the next 10 years, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. It's about 2023. He's
Yeah.
probably going to be the guy. You're going to
Yep.
bring up a veteran backup to push him to make sure he's doing what he's supposed to do. And then you're going to have to go onto the other side of the football and say, here's what we're going to value this year. It's going to be the best player available with a caveat. That
Yes.
dude that can touch the quarterback the best.
Yeah.
that's who we're drafting. We're going best player available and the dude that can touch the quarterback the best. So yeah, that's what the philosophy should be. And that's how I word it and T gonna word it. Defense, defense, defense. So yes, I absolutely am in love with them looking at these particular organizations. Even let's
Yes.
go for the Seahawks really quick because you mentioned
Yeah.
that team as
That's
well.
another. Yep.
They drafted Russell Wilson in the third round, and then they went to defense and they built that defense to be one of the best defenses in NFL history.
History. Yeah.
So yeah, the blueprints that they're looking at and they're trying to emulate, I am
Mhm.
all on board for this.
Yeah.
Sign me up. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Exactly, because you're talking about a Super Bowl champion and a team that could have been a two-time Super Bowl champion. So in the Seattle
Run the
Seahawks.
ball.
Yeah, exactly. Run the ball. Now that part, Arthur Smith, stick with your guns. Don't do what Pete Carroll did. You run the
Exactly.
ball because we know you will. But yeah, I love two things that you said I want to point out, kind of not overlook the Dean Pease factor. That is such a great point and so very critical. How many of those guys that we've spoken to during training camp and all throughout the season who've talked about the impact that he had on them, right? You
Yes.
look at a Foye Alukin, for example, brother got paid and he's now on a defense that literally he is among the leaders in tackles and doing so many great things. I think we always talk about those late draft picks that the Falcons seem to hit on, and I know they
Yes.
don't have him anymore, but he was here for that time frame. And then you think about Grady Jarrett, who really made in part the decision to return because
Yeah.
I'm sure Dean Pease told him, hey,
Believe. Yeah.
yeah, believe. You
We'll
believe
figure it out. Yeah.
Dean Pease will be able to figure out how to utilize you best. And so I think that's an excellent point that you make on Dean Pease and trying to take advantage of him because you hope that he comes back next year if you get the right rookies in place and maybe even if you're able to either secure or retain the right free agents, or your hope is that you keep it for maybe 2 more years and hopefully after that 4 year window of time you've got yourself a true defense that can be reckoned with. And the other thing that you said is this: we all go back and forth on this whole notion of best available or need. I'm going to want Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith to go do exactly what you said. Get the hybrid. Get the
Yeah.
hybrid.
Yeah.
Whoever is the best player available that fits the need on defense,
Yes.
let's go for that guy.
Yes.
Let's go
Absolutely.
for that guy. Now, speaking of fitting a need on defense, he may not have been here for a long period of time, Jarvis, but he made an impact while he was here. And we're talking about, of course, Dwight Freeney. He of the
Yes.
Indianapolis Colts, who then made his way into Atlanta to wrap his career. And now we were learning that he, along with Joe Thomas and Darrelle Revis, who are all three are first-time uh, balloters. Yeah, first-time balloters,
First time back.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
also first-time finalists as well for the Hall of Fame. So we're down to 15. And another Falcon is on that list as well, that final 15. And of course, that is Devin Hester. So I think it's very interesting because my first thought was, now we don't know who they're going to go in as. They may go in as a Falcon, they may not. We don't know that. But ultimately, we still count them in the Falcons family. Who from that list do you think is going to be enshrined this year?
Absolutely, it has to be Dwight Freeney.
Yeah.
Like when you think about looking at some of the other guys, I think it's three that's guaranteed, and then the
Mm-hmm.
rest are up in the air for me. And that is Darrelle Revis, Mr. Revis Island himself. Joe Thomas is definitely going in,
Yeah.
and Mr. Dwight Freeney. When you talking about 125 and a half sacks, the dude was an absolute monster when it came to rushing the passer. And like, here's how you know how good he was. Here's how good he was.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how good he was. He helped Vic Beasley get 15 and a half sacks.
I knew you were going to go. He's tripping,
And
everybody. He's tripping. Let me do.
Brian Cox, Bryant Young, none of those guys were able to help him get to that, back to that. Once Dwight Freeney walked out of that door, Vic Beasley was done. And I think that when you look at the type of influence veterans have in the locker room, a lot of people say, oh, that's bull crap, whatever, whatever. When you think about guys who've done it and still can do it and later on in their careers,
Mm-hmm.
like he can still give you that spin move back in 2016.
Yes.
It still worked.
Yes.
It probably not as effective as it was in his prime, but it still worked. And I think that when you have guys like that that can influence young guys and the influence that he had in that year, I think that you just got to look at it from a standpoint of, yes, this is exactly what needs to go down when it comes to working with guys and the guys that just be able to pass on that knowledge that he
Mm-hmm.
was able to play at a Hall of Fame type level. Now with Devin Hester,
Mm-hmm.
that's the one that I don't know. I just don't know if they're gonna get him in. Now, granted, if you ask me, put him in there
Yeah.
because he's the best kick returner I've ever seen. And I think that if that is how you start in the argument, how do you not put him in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I think at some point you have to set a precedent, right? Because
Yeah.
you never had a punter in there until you got Ray Guy from the Oakland Raiders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of set that precedent. And then you started seeing kickers go in. And you feel like a guy like Morton Anderson kind of opened the floodgates for your
Yes.
kickers. So, yeah, I think that should be, if a special teams guy, if a return specialist is going to set the precedent for other return specialists to be considered for the Hall, he has to be the blueprint. He
Got
has
to.
to go in. The other piece there is this. Now, fortunately for him, being that we believe Dwight Freeney is going in, whether he goes in as a Falcon or as a Colt, he played for the Falcons.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, when players are coming from a certain team, they then bring in or usher in that next player because they have some influence now to be able to say, hey, that guy who played for the same organization, I want him in. So hopefully Dwight Freeney gets in. And even if Devin Hester doesn't get in this year, Freeney will have that influence. And we can't overlook Joe Thomas. I think about
It's just so good.
O linemen who definitely revolutionized the game. And of course, I think about our guy from New Orleans, and of course, he of the Kansas City Chiefs as well, but Willie Roaf. And
Yes.
when you
Such a
and
good player.
I know you're gonna remember this guy's name. So guys, forgive me for having a little bit of a brain fart. I know our guy Andy Bunker would know it right off the bat, but the O lineman who played for years with the Seattle Seahawks. This was back in the day. But
Steve Hutchinson and
no,
Walter
no,
Jones. Walter Jones.
that yes. So
Walter
when you
Jones
start talking about those
took
guys,
Patrick Kearney's soul one day. He took
right?
Patrick Kearney's soul. I will never forget that game, T. When you talk about like
Jarvis is
elite
triggered
level.
again, everybody.
Yes, you triggered me just did. When you talk about elite level soul taking,
Yes,
that day, Patrick Kearney lost his soul on the
yes,
football field.
yes,
And Patrick Kearney was a really good player. Excellent player, lacrosse player, all that good stuff.
right,
He put it
right.
all to work. He
Yeah.
he he exemplified what it is to be able to maximize your talent.
Hmm.
But oh my God, when he ran up against Mr. Jones,
Yeah.
Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, he had a thing going on that day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So yeah, when you those three, I think are just game changers at their respective positions. So yeah, we expect them to be in Canton, and I'll be interested to see how Freeney goes in. But yeah, we're also pulling for Devin Hester and hoping some things go well with him. Just like guys, we got some things going well with Damar Hamlin. We're hearing some positives. His
Yes.
neurological
Amen.
abilities are intact. He opened his eyes Wednesday evening. Some positives like that. I know you want to hear more about it. And where you can get that information is Locked On Sports Today because they give you the real time reaction to all the news. And we just found out some interesting news from the NHL in terms of their All Star game. They want to have their fans to be a little more involved. So that is something that you might hear them talk about on Locked On Sports as well. Locked On Sports Today has their version of For the Culture. They call it Take of the Day. So who knows what their take of the day might be? If you want to know, you should check them out where you check us out on the Odyssey app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget, after ATL Day Ones, it's Locked On Sports Today.